All right, so this week we'll take a look at this mimer by Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. Um, just a quick, I guess, intro. I know that we've looked at his at the Sefer before, Sefer the Sichos Musar, um, and it's basically a collection of his, his I guess speeches or the sichot that he gave in yeshiva at Mir. Um, During his time in Israel. He survived the Holocaust through Shanghai, through the Mir yeshivas they did, and ended up in Israel. And this is a mimer that's, it was given, it looks like around 1972, Tafshin Lamed Beis, so about 50 years ago. And it's around Parshas Mishpatim. It does tie in with Nadav and Avihu, but it sort of becomes broadens out from there as well, as we'll see. So he starts by quoting a couple of psukim from Parshas Mishpatim. It says, "Vayiru es Elokei Yisrael," and this is talking about Nadav and Avihu, the Zakenim, as well as Aaron and Moshe. That this was during the period of Maimed or Sinai, of when Hashem is giving us the Torah, and it says that they saw Hashem, right? They actually peered upon and saw Hashem, their God. It says, "El atzili b'nei Yisrael lo shalach yado v'yechazu es Elokim v'yochlu v'yishtu." And the next pasuk says these atzilim, which we'll have to see in a moment what that means, of b'nei Yisrael, Hashem didn't punish them. No, lo shalach yado v'yechazu, as they were looking at Hashem, and they ate and they drank. So it's a little bit cryptic. So let's see. It says, because of Rashi, she nizchayvu misa. They were chayiv misa. Ela shelo ratza hakadosh baruch hu l'arvev simchas haTorah v'himtin lenadav v'avihu ad yom chanukas hamishkan lezakenim ad vayhi kemis onanim v'gomer v'tvaer bam eish Hashem v'tocha b'ktzei hamachne b'ketzinim shebemachne. So Rashi says that, what does it mean that Hashem didn't punish them then? Meaning that Hashem didn't want to punish them right at Maimed Har Sinai, in order that it would really sort of, put a huge damper on the simcha of receiving the Torah, to see Nadav and Avihu die at that moment. So instead, he waits until they inaugurate the Mishkan, and at that point, we know that Nadav and Avihu die. So we'll get into a little bit later into more about Nadav and Avihu, specifically this episode versus what happens later on by the inauguration of the Mishkan. But and Rashi also says that by the Zakenim were also apparently in this Shinis Chayiv Misa, that they were all Chayiv Misa for what they did. The Zakenim also, but it wasn't until also later on when you have the Bnei Israel complaining in the Midbar that that they were also at that point that's when they were dealt with as well. Okay, so but now we have to really understand what is going on, and clearly what we're seeing here is that we usually wait until the Parsha Shmini, where we see Nadav and Avihu dying. That's usually where we start to talk about it. But what we're gaining from these psukim and from Rashi is that this was actually something that happened not at the inauguration of the Mishkan, but much earlier. So he asks, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz asks, Ma haya chetam? What exactly was their chet? What did they do wrong? So Kasav Rashi b'shem Tanchuma. So Rashi says, further Rashi, as he's quoting the Medrash Tanchuma, Hayu mistaklim bo belev gas mitoch achila ushtia. That when they were looking at Hashem, it was with some kind of haughtiness, meaning maybe they felt that they were great, something like this, from within achila and shtia, because the pasuk says, "Vayechazus Elokim vayuchlu vayishu." They were looking at Hashem, they were gazing upon Him, and they ate and they drank. Okay, so v'nira levar al pi masha kasaf ha'Eben Ezra. So then Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says, let's look at the Eben Ezra. It says b'shem Rabbi Yehuda Levi. in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Levi, Ki alkein kasu vayechazu es Elokim vayuchlu vayishtu. That when it says that they looked at Hashem and they ate and they drank, lomar lecha, she'afal pi she'nehenu miziv hashchina mikom makom hutzrachu la'achila v'shtiya. The Ibn Ezra explains that they had achieved this level that they could look at Hashem. And this is, again, at Ma'amad Har Sinai, and they could, so to speak, enjoy, the Ziv HaShechina, right? Whatever that exactly means, the glory, the light of the Shechina, whatever that means exactly. But at the same time, they still required to eat and drink. V'lo Moshe Rabbeinu shelo acha v'lo shasa kol arba'im yom shehaya b'har. And that is in, contradistinction to Moshe Rabbeinu, who we know from Sukkim later on that say that when he was up on the mountain receiving the Torah, and actually more than one time, right, for 40 days, he didn't eat or drink. So again, we're sort of just, Rav Chaim is sort of putting all this together, trying to understand, exactly what was the chait and what was going on in this episode. So, Klomar, he says, Sha'afal pi she'nisalu Nadav and Avihu HB l'madrega ha'elyona beyoser she'v'koach enush lahasig. He says, on the one hand, we see that Nadav and Avihu and the Zakinim were able to elevate themselves to a very high level, probably a very high level that a person is able to achieve. Vihi l'rosas elokim kaviyachon. That's somehow whatever that means that they were able to gaze upon Hashem. But it says, when Moshe says, can I see more of your countenance? Can I, and Hashem says, no one can look at me and live. And yet, right, they are at this level that they were able to. Ukvar heru harashbam ki b'Moshe ksiv ki yarei mehabit v'hemu ra'u. And he says the Rashbam also, provides a little bit of an interesting ha'ara here, which is that way back when at the sneh, the burning bush, Moshe averts his eyes because it's ki yarei mehabit. He was afraid to look. So and that was also some form of the Shechina within the bush. So he himself didn't want to, at least not at that stage. But here we see that Nadav and Avihu and the Zakinim did. So in kol zos lo nisalu kamoshe Rabbeinu asher ala lemara v'nehene miziv Shechina. But what we do see is that Nadav and Avihu and the Zakinim weren't really able to elevate themselves as high as Moshe was. That he's also enjoying the ziv hashchina. He's not eating. So he himself, Moshe Rabbeinu, is able to be completely, ruchani, completely spiritual about this, and cut off anything that was for him, anything physical, which is why he was able to not eat during that period. But by them, even with all this, the elevation that they were able to achieve, nishara zika gashmis koshehi. There was some kind of, at least a small amount of physicality with them. They still needed to eat and drink. So so what we're seeing is that at the moment of this incredible elevation of their souls, of their to be able to look at the Shechina, and that would have been a moment that really sort of purifies the physical, and it really becomes a pleasure for the neshama, not a physical pleasure. Mikom makom nutrabehem ta'arovish or gasus agashmiya sheba. But yet at the same time, there was some kind of a sort of a bit of this this gasus agashmius, this physicality that remained within them. They weren't able to purify themselves from it. And he says that's what Rashi means, that they were looking at Hashem, belev gas, meaning that there was something still physical within them. It wasn't purely spiritual. V'alkach nenshu. That's why, therefore, they were punished. Uman nora haya haonish. But how awesome, in the literal sense, right? Was this punishment? Misa besreifa. I mean, they were burnt. Right. That's what happens later on by the inauguration of the Mishkan. And why? Because they weren't able to elevate themselves just a little bit more to sort of completely purify themselves from anything physical. The Gemara Bava Kama says it's explaining this pasuk in Tehillim. It says, surrounding him, those that surround him, meaning those that surround Hashem, nisara ma'od, it becomes a huge storm. What does that mean? The Gemara says that's how we understand that Hashem is that much more medakdek with those that are closest to tzadikim, kichuta sara, like a hair's breadth, right? It's he's much more exacting. Okay. Begashmius zu shenishar behem af he haisa gashmius shal mitzvah, but Rav Chaim is not, he wants to dig a little bit deeper into this. Let's understand this a little bit better. But the Gashmius, it's still within Nadav and Avihu and the Zakanim, but it's not, regular, physicality of what we might think about, like, hey, I'm participating in Ma'amad Har Sinai, but in my mind I'm thinking about the Super Bowl, right? That's not what we're talking about here. This was a Gashmius of mitzvah. Moshe Kasav Ramban, because quoting the Ramban, he says V'tam v'yachlu v'yushtu. Right, that's a big question. Like, what exactly were they eating and drinking, at this, during this period? So the Ramban says Sha'achlu sham hashlamim b'tachti sahar. They're eating the korbanos that were given at the base of the mountain. Lifnei Elokim terem she'yeshuvu el ahalehem, before they return back to their tents. Because there's a very specific halachos about shlamim, where they can be eaten. They have to be eaten only within Yerushalayim, within the gates, within the walls. By Shiloh, it was also within, you had to see Shiloh, you had a certain distance from Shiloh that you could eat them within. So here they had to eat them within a certain distance of the Mizbeach, which is right at the base of the mountain. So lo b'machane, but they couldn't eat it in the machane. So they have to be, right? That's v'tam v'yishtu. Oh, sorry, that's why they were eating. They're eating the korban. V'tam v'yishtu. So what are they drinking? Sha'asu. This is all within the Ramban. Sha'asu simcha v'yom tov kikin chova l'smach v'kabbalah satar v'chulei. And the fact that they're drinking is simchas yontif, which is a simcha that it's an obligation upon us in Kabbalah Satorah. When we receive the Torah, there is an idea of simchas yontif there. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, mikansha osim mishta legamra shotorah. Right. I believe this is maybe where maybe one of the sources how we know about making a siyum and having a suda, that sort of thing around when you finish Torah. V'ne'amar b'David. Isnadvam lebinyan Beis Hamikdash v'yizbechu laHashem zvachim ayalu olos laHashem. Right, when they built the Beis Hamikdash, that they brought shlamim, zvachim or shlamim, and they brought olos as well laHashem. Vayuchlu vayushtu lifnei Hashem bayom hahu b'simcha gedola. And it says that they ate and they drank the korbanos, and they're drinking because it's a simchas yontif, it's a simcha gedola. V'yafkam b'yom chasunas haTorah kenasu. So to here, when we're having this sort of marriage with the Torah at Har Sinai, it would have been the same thing. You would have had korbanos and you would have had wine. Okay, so that's why they're drinking and eating. So it's all according, what Rav Chaim was just pointing out. This is all the davar mitzvah. This is all mitzvah and holiness. Okay. Ukemishte she'osin legamra shotorah shehi simchas haTorah va'achila hayisa achila shlamim meshuchan gavoa achilas mitzvah v'kapara. So again, where is the chait if this is all within a mitzvah which should be considered to be spiritual, not physical? So it says Mikan ana atalamad ki svivav nisara ma'od, that those around Hashem are have this great storm. If this were anybody else within Bnei Israel, this would have been a great mitzvah for what they were doing. And quite the opposite. If you didn't participate in this for anybody else, then you would have been over on a halacha of that you're not making a mishnah, that you're not making a simchas yontif out of finishing the Torah as you're learning the Torah. So halacha u'mitzvah zu hofeches lechet eitzon nashim gedolim k'nadav avihu. So something like this should have been the opposite of a chet, right? For something like Nadav and Avihu zakenim shnis romamu mi'al lecho dargas enush v'nis be'u al kach gechor mechumuros hilachar shinizralu lematzav shal nehenin miziv shchina hayaleham nismoch below achila v'shtiya. So for them at that level, they should have been able to be sameach. They should have had that simcha without having to eat and drink. They should have been able to, as we saw before by Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself was not eating and drinking for that 40-day period, right? So we have the model that they probably should have, that they should have tried to strive for as well. Umikan nilmad as goda hatvia shenidba adam haola b'malos haTorah v'hayira im mechaser kol shehu b'madrega shehu roi aleha kol echad lefi dargaso. So he says we learned something great here. This is an incredible idea that Hashem has, the complaints that Hashem will have for those that are bigger and greater in terms of their, what they've been able to achieve spiritually, is going to be quite large, and even if you are off by the mark by just a little bit, it can be severe, right? The punishment can be severe. But,
Jeff?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are brief questions allowed? This is my first time.
Yeah, for sure, please.
Okay. Could you explain the degree of holiness, or the degree to which they were tzaddikim? How high was it, and what had they done to achieve that level?
Right. Great question. So, the one thing he says also is koach lefi dargaso. So I think part of it is you have to know where you're holding, right? The old idea, the old phrase is don't think you're bigger than your britches, but also don't think that you're smaller than your britches, right? You have to understand where you are. So for Nadav and Avihu, and thinking about who they were, right? They're the son of Aharon HaKohen, right? They're growing up in the house of Aharon HaKohen, where all of your dad and your aunt and your uncle are on Nevi'im, right? Right?
Okay.
You know what I mean? So I don't know, but I'm just sort of picturing the scene, and I'm thinking, and then you have as grandparents, you have Yocheved and Amram. I mean, Amram was the Gadol Ador, right? Right? Amram is one of those listed in the Gemara as never having sinned, right? As never having had a chet in his life. So yeah, clearly these are great people, right? These are, they grew up in this house. They're participating, right? The fact that they are able to participate, they're not in the Machane at the time of Maimon Arsina, but they're up with their father, with Aharon. So clearly, they've already been sort of separated out as the up and coming leaders of Bnei Israel.
Okay.
Right. So we clearly see that they are. Now, again, they have to. So it was incumbent upon them to understand their own level, and that seems to be. Again, this is a very, for anybody else, what they did would have been a mitzvah. For them, it's they should have realized apparently, where they were. But we're not done yet. We're gonna still, he's still developing this idea, but we're gonna broaden it out. We're gonna broaden it out. And so he says, "V'chein anu motzim beGemaras in Sanhedrin." So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, "Sha'amar Rabbi Eliezer leRabbi Akiva shacha kasha mishalhen." So the Gemara is, he doesn't, this is Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. I mean, his Bekias in Torah is incredible. So he's only quoting little bits and pieces from a lot of different places. So we have to sort of fill in the gaps. But what he says is that this is the story of when Rabbi Eliezer, who's the Rav, who's the rabbi of Rabbi Akiva, his main teacher, Rabbi Akiva's main teacher was Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. So he's on his deathbed, and a group of colleagues, including Rabbi Akiva, come to visit him. And Rabbi Eliezer turns to Rabbi Akiva and he says that Shocha Kashem Shohen, that your fate is going to be much more difficult than theirs, meaning that what Rabbi Eliezer was saying is why did you wait to come and visit me at my deathbed? You should have been learning Torah from me all these years. Now, the backstory is that Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkos is right after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkos had a disagreement with Sanhedrin. He ends up being excommunicated. It's more of just because he disagreed with the Sanhedrin. It's a whole story. So without getting into all the details, but it was more of an argument over how what was the process after the Churban Beis HaMikdash of how do we understand halacha, how is it decided, and you sort of can't argue with Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin decided we needed to sort of put a line in the sand here, and they put Rabbi Eliezer into excommunication to Nidui because of it. But what Rabbi Eliezer it seems to be saying is that you should have realized, Rabbi Akiva, that you could have been learning with me all these years, and you didn't. You sort of stayed away. So your fate is going to be worse than them. So and we know that was the case, right? The Asara Haruge Malchus became Hayasar Shasarku as Besara Masreko Shabarza, right? His flesh was combed with the iron combs. But why was his fate so horrible? So it says because the ka'ulam, his heart was open like a great social hall. Because had you only been around me, you would have learned even more Torah. That's what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. He's sort of giving a mussar and saying, this is what's happening. So V'hari Rabbi Akiva anus hayu beglasha nidu the Rabbi Eliezer, but he was an anus. Like this is back to Reb Chaim is saying, what's going on? How do you blame Rabbi Akiva? He was in nidui. Like what was he supposed to do? So not only was there a claim, a complaint against him from Shemayim, but a very, very strong one, very severe one. He should have elevated himself with more Torah by learning from Rabbi Eliezer all those years. And we have to. This is Rabbi Akiva. Who is Rabbi Akiva? Moshe Rabbeinu sees that there's a whole ma'isa in the Gemara in Menachos that says that that Hashem is busying himself putting crowns like on all the osios, right? And Moshe Rabbeinu is up on Har Sinai saying, Kadosh Baruch Hu, like what do you what's going on? Why are we delayed in getting the you're delaying us by putting in all these ksarim, all these crowns? And Hashem says, well, I have to do this because there's going to be somebody later on who's going to learn so many halachos from each one of these crowns. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, who's this? And he gets to see Rabbi Akiva. He sees Rabbi Akiva in his Beis Medrash. You can't believe this. And he turns to Kadosh Baruch Hu and says, why me? Why are you giving the Torah through me? Why not through Rabbi Akiva, right? That's the person we're talking about here. Ish lecha adam kazev atanosin Torah al yadi. This is what Moshe Rabbeinu asks about Akiva. Like, why are you giving it to me? You should be giving it to us. Right? And that's the complaint from Shemai, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he should have been learning even more so. He had the capability to elevate and to achieve even more. And that's the complaint against Rabbi Akiva. So we won't finish this. Why don't we finish to this dot, and then we'll pick this up next week, because there's just so much packed in here. It's only 4 pages, but it's so much packed in. So I think we'll devote 2 weeks to this so that we can really get through it to understand it. Because the end of this piece will it's just mind blowing where Rav Chaim Shmulevitz takes us. It's a beautiful insight that he gives us at the end. So I don't want to rush that. So we'll just take a look at this last piece, and then we'll stop. So we are Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian Amru. So there's another Gemara again. Another one of the Harugi Malchus, the Rabbi Chanina ben Tradion. The Gemara says Shahaya Osik b'Torah b'Shas Hashmad, ukeshet tafsuhu amru le amayka asakta be'araisa amar lehu ka'asher tzivani Hashem Elokai. So the Gemara says that he was very involved in learning and teaching Torah at the time that the Romans completely ossered it and they outlawed it. And so the Romans caught up to him and put him in jail. And they asked him, "Why are you doing this?" And Rav Chanina ben Tradian said, "I don't answer to you. I don't care about your laws. I'm doing what Hashem, my God, has commanded me." Miyad gazru alav l'sreifa. So he was right away pronounced that his his sentence would be that he would be burnt alive. But the Gemara asks, why such a terrible fate for him? So the Gemara answers, because he was saying the letters of Hashem, of the ineffable name. It's actually, I think it's a machlokas. Rashi and Tosfos over there. Is it that he was saying the Shem Havaya Yudke Vavke? Was he actually pronouncing it? Was it the name of 42 letters? Whatever it was, he was apparently pronouncing it in some way. But what he did was because it was from teaching purposes or for learning purposes. Lo salami lasos. The pasuk says, by all the abominations of those people who live in Israel, the nations who live in Israel, you can't learn to do those abominations. Aval, but it says lasot. Aval ata lomed lahavinu lahoros, but you can learn them in order to understand and to teach. So Perish Rashi Sham Vizalishano Islamed Avad, he was only doing it to teach himself. Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian is only doing it to teach, to understand it for himself. Same idea from Perish Rashi is that yes, he was doing this, that's something that should have been mutter, but for him and his level, apparently this would have been a problem. So ein kates l'tavia al adam gadol b'tikun ma'isa. There is no end for the complaint for anybody who is a great person when we're talking about fixing ourselves and to become better people. Can you think that you have to do this in order to learn Torah? But he should have been more concerned about what am I doing? How is this looking? I'm one of the Gedolei Ador. What does that look like for me when I'm doing this? And because of it, he is punished greatly with Sreifa. So we'll stop here. This is not the end. We're going to see more about Rav Chanina ben Tradian, and he'll really start to take apart this a little bit further. And like I said, we'll finish this next week.